Nightbooks is a 2021 Netflix adaptation of the 2018 book of the same name by J.A. White. The movie is well done and would be alright for younger kids if you let them watch the Goosebumps shows, because it plays very much like one of those. The story itself, though, is a bit of a letdown in that it isn't really original, but is a mishmash of other stories. But there are Lovecraftian elements with a direct nod to one of his works. Not having read the book, I don't know if the elements were put in by the author or if the director or one of the screenwriters added them into the Netflix version, having recognized those elements. But we'll get to those. At the beginning, there is a young boy who loves horror and is always writing horror stories. His parents are arguing about something and he is very upset. He takes his notebooks filled with stories, which he calls his Nightbooks, and goes down to the basement of his apartment building, determined to burn them in the furnace. The door to a basement apartment is open. The 1987 vampire movie The Lost Boys is playing on a TV. The Lost Boys title initially referring to the gang of youths from Peter Pan who lived in Neverland and never grew up. The boy walks in and starts eating a piece of pumpkin pie that is sitting on a table. The door slams shut and we discover that he is trapped inside a non-Euclidean apartment that is extremely larger on the inside, being its own pocket dimension, and can teleport around the world. It is a witch's house. She captures little children and kills them if they don't have a useful skill that she can exploit. The young boy says he writes scary stories, so the witch keeps him alive, but he must write scary stories every day and read one to her every night. That plot is taken directly from 1001 Nights, or also known as Arabian Nights in many English adaptations. There is one extra stipulation: none of the stories can have happy endings. There is a young female who is the servant of the witch, and it also contains the trope of a cat familiar which is antagonistic to the two main characters, but in the end helps them. The cat is named Lenore, an obvious nod to Edgar Allan Poe. The two release some little monsters that are skulls with bug legs and waving tentacles on their back. Later on in the movie, one gets into the young boy's backpack and shreds all his Nightbooks except one. That one has a multi-eyed, multi-tentacled monster on the cover, but he is out of stories and makes one up about the same tentacle monster so that they can trick the witch and try to escape. The next part contains spoilers, if you care, but most of them are pretty obvious. So they try to escape, but find themselves lost in the woods, but are still in part of the apartment. They come across a giant gingerbread house. As you can easily deduce now, the second stolen plot line is that the rest of the story is based on Hansel and Gretel. The witch finds them, which is where we get to her backstory. She is actually portraying the character of Gretel, but she couldn't kill the original witch. She was too powerful. She calls her the first witch and is keeping her magically asleep. Now we can consider this plot point as taken from Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, or even the Call of Cthulhu. She continually drains the first witch's power to use herself, but it is the scary stories with no happy endings that are pacifying the first witch and keeping her asleep. What is Lovecraft known for? Scary stories with no happy endings. But the first witch wakes up and has a magic fight with the original witch, and the kids use this opportunity to find a way out of the apartment and back into the young boy's basement. But the first witch pops out and chases them. He pretends to read another story out of his last remaining tentacle monster-covered nightbook. The first witch loves the story and doesn't notice that she is now standing in front of the burning furnace. The young boy throws the book into the fire. The first witch tries to retrieve it, and the kids push her in and she burns completely this time, never explaining why it worked now but not the first time with the oven. It is of course left open for a sequel, but it does have a cool, unhappy ending scene after the kids are reunited with their parents. So, to recap the Lovecraftian elements, we have a story in an interdimensional witch house, though it is a traditional cat familiar instead of a rat. We have small tentacle monsters. We have a Nightbook with a tentacle monster on its cover that turns out the stories are magical, plus we get to hear the tentacle monster's story. The first witch is a primordial being that has been kept slumbering for hundreds of years, and every story has to have an unhappy ending. Yes, these very well could be me projecting my love of the Cthulhu mythos onto the story, but I didn't even think about it until halfway through the film. because one of the previous children that was held captive by the witch had been writing diary passages in the margins of other books hidden in the witch's library. The young boy finds them, and the first passage he reads is written in the margins of Dagon by H.P. Lovecraft. I even double-checked the text to make sure it was the same Dagon. Exposing regions which for innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths. Soon as I saw that, I'm like, that's real familiar. Like I mentioned earlier, I don't know if these elements were all in the original book or added by the director or scriptwriter who loves the mythos, because you would have expected them to use another fairy tale as opposed to Dagon. Is it a Lovecraftian film? No. But the nods are there. So be sure to subscribe for more horror, occult, and Lovecraft madness. Until next time, Cthulhu Fatagan.